Snow blew sideways across the grocery store parking lot, stinging his face as he sprinted toward the screams. People were scattering, slipping on the icy pavement, diving behind cars. A runaway truck, driverless, skidding fast, was sliding straight toward a woman pushing a cart with a toddler strapped inside. She froze, trapped between two parked SUVs, nowhere to move. And in that split second, as the truck fishtailed and metal shrieked against asphalt, Ethan Cole dropped his bag of oranges and ran harder than his body had allowed in years. His breath tore in his chest. His bad knee buckled. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Not this time. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from tonight, and hit that like and subscribe button if you believe courage still matters in this world. Hours earlier, Ethan had been just another face in Brookside, Ohio, a 33-year-old auto shop inspector whose life had shrunk to quiet routines and empty evenings. Most of his neighbors knew him as the polite guy who shoveled everyone's sidewalk, the man who never caused trouble and never asked for anything. But beneath that calm exterior lived a man carrying scars he didn't mention. A divorce 2 years behind him. A firefighting career cut short after a warehouse collapse left him with a shattered leg and a lingering limp. A heart that still felt bruised from everything he'd lost. He lived alone in a second-floor walk-up across from the old train tracks. His days were steady clock in at the shop crawl under engines check. Brake line sign reports try not to think about the adrenaline-filled life he used to have. Nights were quieter, reheated leftover sports on low volume, staring at the empty dining chair across from him, the one no one sat in anymore. His sister Megan called every few days to check in, always telling him he needed to let people in again, but Ethan brushed it off. Letting people in was how you got hurt. Still, he wasn't bitter. He cared. Deeply. He couldn't stop being the man who wanted to protect others even if he didn't talk about it. That part of him had never died. It had just gone dormant, waiting for something to wake it up. That something arrived on the coldest Saturday before Christmas when Ethan ran into the Lucky Mart to grab a rotisserie chicken for dinner. He didn't see anything unusual at first. Just bundled-up families' carts piled with holiday food, the smell of cinnamon bread drifting from the bakery. But when he walked back outside juggling his groceries, he heard the squeal of tires, the slam of a horn, the cracking sound of ice under a sliding weight. Then he spotted her. A young mother trapped in the path of a runaway truck, gripping the cart so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The toddler in the seat began to cry. People yelled, but no one moved. No one was close enough. No one except Ethan. For the first time in a long time, something inside him snapped awake. The world slowed. His instincts, buried under months of quiet living, roared to life. And with nothing but seconds between tragedy and rescue, he knew exactly what he had to do. The grocery store lot was still chaos when the truck finally slammed into a snowbank and hissed to a stop. People rushed in. Someone called 911. The mother clutched her toddler and sobbed into Ethan's coat, thanking him over and over while he tried to steady his breathing. His knee throbbed viciously. He told her he was fine. He always told everyone he was fine. By the time he limped back to his apartment that evening, the adrenaline was long gone, and the ache had settled deep. He heated his dinner, sat at his table, and told himself it was just another close call. Nothing more. Nothing less. But the next day at the auto shop, the consequences of stepping in showed up in a way he didn't expect. A coworker named Brad, the kind of guy who never missed a chance to talk himself up, leaned against Ethan's toolbox with a smirk. "Saw you on the local Facebook page," he said loud enough for half the shop to hear. "Hero of Lucky Mart, huh? Guess even broken-down firefighters need to feel useful sometimes." Ethan kept his eyes on the form he was filling out. "Wasn't like that?" he said quietly. "Sure, man." Brad went on nudging the mechanic beside him, except the comments were wild. Why was a guy with a limp trying to run? He could have made it worse. Should have waited for someone more capable. You know how people get. A couple of the younger mechanics chuckled awkwardly, not mean just uncomfortable, but the laughter cut all the same. Ethan swallowed hard. He wasn't surprised he'd been recorded. Everybody recorded everything. What stung was hearing people debate whether he had any right to help. He forced himself to stay steady. "Glad the woman and kid are okay. That's all that matters." "Sure, big guy," Brad said, pushing off the toolbox. "Just try not to get yourself killed next time. We'd hate to lose our slowest inspector." The others snickered. Brad walked away. Ethan let out a slow breath, trying to unclench his jaw. It had always been like this since the injury, people assuming he was half the man he used to be. People assuming they knew his limits. He stayed professional. Stayed even. But inside, the old doubt crept in again. You're not what you used to be. You can't take real risks. You're just a cautionary tale with a limp. Later that afternoon, the shop owner, Rick, a decent man in general, called Ethan into his office. "Heard about the incident," Rick said. "Glad you're all right. But listen, maybe take it easy on anything too physical. Liability's tight around here, and if you get hurt again under our watch insurance, it'll eat us alive." "I wasn't on company time," Ethan said gently. "I know, but you're part of the team. If something happens to you out there, it still reflects on us. You get where I'm coming from?" Ethan nodded, even though it stung deeper than Brad's mockery. He left the office feeling like he'd brought trouble simply by trying to do the right thing. 2 days later, the mistreatment took a different shape. He stopped by his sister Megan's house to drop off a Christmas gift for her 8-year-old son, Theo. When he walked in, Theo lit up instantly. Uncle Ethan, the boy, shouted, barreling into him. "Mom told me you saved somebody." "Is that true?" "Something like that," Ethan said, smiling faintly. But Megan stood in the kitchen doorway, arms folded tight, worry etched across her face. "I saw the video," she said. "Ethan, what were you doing? You could have re-injured your leg. You could have been crushed." "I'm fine," he said. "No one else was close enough to help." "That doesn't matter." Megan snapped, her voice cracking. "Do you have any idea what it felt like watching that? Seeing you limp after the truck, like your body was going to give out at any second after everything you've been through." He opened his mouth, but she kept going. "You're not indestructible anymore, Ethan. You're not the same man you were before that building fell. You have to stop acting like you are." Theo's face fell. He stepped behind the couch, eyes darting between them. Ethan's stomach twisted. He had come to bring a gift, not cause tension. He didn't want Theo hearing any of this. "Meg," he said softly. "I didn't run because I thought I was invincible. I ran because a kid was about to get hurt. I know," she said. "But I can't lose you, and you keep risking yourself like you're trying to prove the universe wrong." He shook his head. "I'm not trying to prove anything." But the truth scraped deep. Maybe he was. Maybe part of him couldn't stand the thought that his best days were behind him. Theo came closer, tugging at his sleeve. "Mom," he whispered loudly, "Uncle Ethan saved somebody. Doesn't that mean he's a hero again?" "Sweetheart," Megan said, rubbing her forehead. "I just want him safe, okay?" Her fear was real, and it hurt just as sharply as the ridicule. Later, after he left, Ethan sat in his truck in her driveway for a long time. Snow fell softly around him. The weight in his chest was heavier than any he'd carried from the shop. Being judged by strangers hurt, but being doubted by someone he loved, that cut deeper. He didn't want to argue with Megan. He knew she meant well. But something in him felt smaller every time someone reminded him of his fragility. He missed who he used to be. Missed feeling capable. Missed being trusted. The pressure didn't stop there. At the shop the following week, a supervisor named Clark pulled him aside after lunch. "Got a complaint," he said. "Customer said your inspection took too long." "I was being thorough," Ethan replied. "Or you're slowing down," Clark said bluntly. "Listen, Cole, we need efficiency, especially during the holiday rush." Ethan blinked. "Are you saying I'm a problem?" Clark sighed. "I'm saying maybe this line of work isn't the best fit anymore, not since your injury. Maybe there's something lighter duty you can transition into." It wasn't the words that broke something open in him. It was the way Clark avoided eye contact, as if Ethan were already an inconvenience. He left work early that day, claiming he needed to ice his knee. He didn't. He just couldn't sit there any longer while people whispered about how the injured firefighter was slowing everyone down. The pressure was building everywhere, work home inside his own body. But he didn't crack. Not yet. He kept moving, kept showing up, kept being polite, dependable, steady. But the next blow came from a place he never expected. At the hardware store a few days later, Ethan bumped into the woman whose toddler he'd saved. Her name was Caroline. She smiled warmly when she saw him. "I've been trying to find you," she said. "I wanted to thank you again." He nodded. "Just glad you're both okay." "You didn't just help us," she added. "You changed everything for me, made me see how fast life can shift. I'm grateful." Before he could respond, a man at the adjacent checkout lane cut in. "No offense, dude, but I saw the video. You could have gotten that lady killed." Ethan turned slowly. The man, a stranger in a camo jacket, shrugged. "You were limping so bad the truck could have swerved toward her because of you. Should have left it to someone fitter. Someone who can actually run." Caroline's face tightened. "Hey," she said, "that's not fair." "No, it's realistic," the man insisted. "Heroics aren't for everybody. Some people need to stay out of the way." Ethan felt heat rise behind his ribs. One sharp reply sat on the tip of his tongue, but he swallowed it. He wasn't going to argue with someone who'd never been in a life or death moment. Someone who had the privilege of standing on the sidelines. "Have a good evening," Ethan said quietly. Caroline looked at him with wide, apologetic eyes after the man left. "For what it's worth," she said, "I think what you did was brave." He nodded, forcing a small smile. But inside, something cracked. Not broken, but strained, stretched thin. That was the night he went home and sat on his couch without turning the lights on. Snow drifted past the window. Holiday lights blinked across the street. He didn't move for a long time. He wasn't seeking praise. He didn't need a parade. But the constant judgment coworkers calling him slow supervisors, doubting him strangers, telling him he should have stayed back, it all piled up until even breathing felt like another chore. And the worst part wasn't what they said to him. It was how Theo looked at him now. Hopeful, worried, confused all at once. Ethan hated that his nephew had heard someone say he used to be a hero, like that title had expired the moment his leg gave out. By the end of that week, the pressure hit its peak. The shop posted new schedules. Ethan had been moved to a lesser role without warning. Inspection duties cut, hours reduced. A note taped to the schedule board read, "Reassigned due to capability and safety considerations." No conversation, no explanation, just a quiet demotion wrapped in corporate language. The room spun. His pulse pounded in his ears. Brad chuckled from across the break table. "Guess they finally made it official," he said with a smirk. For a moment, Ethan couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The weight of every comment, every doubt, every sideways glance crashed over him at once. He walked out of the shop without a word, not angry, not shouting, just done. Snowflakes landed on his coat as he stepped outside, each one dissolving instantly on the fabric. He stared out across the lot, the same kind of lot where everything had started just days earlier, and felt the world narrow to a pinpoint. Something was coming, something he couldn't see yet, but he felt it in his bones. A breaking point, a spark, a moment that would decide everything that came next. Snow hammered against Ethan's windshield as he sat in his truck outside the auto shop, engine, idling breath fogging the cab. His name was still taped on the schedule board behind him, next to the words reassigned due to capability and safety considerations. A quiet demotion, a public declaration that he wasn't trusted anymore. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. For a moment, he almost turned the truck off, went upstairs to his apartment, and disappeared for the rest of winter. He'd done it before. Shut out the world, convinced himself that solitude meant safety. Convinced himself that staying still meant no one else could get hurt, or disappointed, or embarrassed to be associated with him. But then his phone buzzed. A text from Megan. Theo forgot his book bag at school. He's freaking out about tomorrow's project. Could you grab it for him? I'm stuck at work. Please. He closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. Even on his worst days for that kid, he'd move mountains. He put the truck in drive and pulled out, heading toward Brookside Elementary before the janitors locked up for the night. The snowstorm was worsening by the minute. Gusts blew sideways and visibility dropped with every mile. What should have been a 10-minute drive took nearly 20. By the time he pulled into the school lot, the streetlights were flickering through sheets of white. He grabbed his coat, limped up the walkway, and knocked on the glass until the custodian recognized him. Theo's book bag was right where his nephew had left it in the cubby, with a laminated construction paper shark taped above it. Ethan smiled faintly, shook off the snow, slung the little bag over his shoulder, and stepped back outside. That's when he heard it. A metallic groan, a high-pitched whine cutting through the storm. Then a crash, sharp, violent, echoing across the schoolyard. He turned toward the sound. Across the street, the old Scenic Ridge apartments were glowing orange. Not holiday lights' flames. One window had already blown out. Smoke poured into the night. The wind carried sparks across the snow like fireflies. Ethan froze for only a breath. Then he ran. His limp buckled under him, but he pushed through it. Snow swallowed his boots. Ice cracked beneath every step. His lungs screamed from the cold. But he ran, because he knew that sound, that smell, that color in the sky. He knew fire, and he knew what happened when people waited for someone more capable. He'd lived the consequences of that. He wouldn't live them again. As he reached the building, a woman stumbled out into the snow, barefoot, clutching a blanket around her shoulders. She was coughing so hard she couldn't speak. Behind her, another explosion shattered a second-floor window. People screamed from inside. "Someone call 911, Ethan shouted, scanning the crowd. "I already did," a teenager cried from her porch. "They said trucks are delayed, the roads are frozen." Ethan's stomach dropped. In a storm like this, the fire department could be 15, maybe 20 minutes out. They didn't have 20 minutes. He turned to the barefoot woman, trying to steady her. "Is everyone out? Who's inside?" She shook her head, eyes wide with terror. "My neighbor's kids, 2 of them. I think they're still upstairs. I banged on their door, but the smoke... Oh God, please!" Her knees buckled. Ethan caught her, lowered her gently to the snow, and forced himself to stay calm. "How old?" he asked. 7 and 9, she gasped. His pulse roared in his ears. Theo's age. Without thinking, he shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The flames lit the snow around him in a hellish orange glow. Smoke curled into the sky like a black banner. He could hear the fire breathing, growing, moving. He didn't have turnout gear. No mask, no backup, no safety line. He had one good leg, one bad leg, and one chance. He sucked in a breath of freezing air, letting it fill the ache inside him until it steadied. Theo's bright face flickered across his mind. Naomi the firefighter, he couldn't save the one he still dreamed about, flashed through next. And then the woman and her toddler at Lucky Mart, faces twisted in fear. He'd been given a second chance once. Maybe this was why. He sprinted up the exterior stairs as flames licked out from the second-floor hallway. Heat pushed against him like a wall. He used his forearm to shield his face and kicked the door with all the strength he had left. It broke open. Smoke swallowed him instantly. He hit the floor low. Crawl. Always crawl. He could hear his old captain's voice in his head, steady, calm, unyielding. He crawled fast down the hallway, hand sweeping the wall. His knee screamed with every movement, but he didn't slow down. Not while he could hear faint crying somewhere up ahead. A child's cry. He moved faster. "Hey," he called, coughing hard. "If you can hear me, call out." A tiny voice. "In here, left side, third door." He surged forward, grabbed the doorknob, yanked his hand back, too hot. He balled his sleeve around the handle, twisted, and shoved the door open. Two kids huddled together in a corner, one boy, one girl, eyes red from smoke, cheeks streaked with tears. "We can't get out," the boy cried. "Mom went to work. We didn't know." "It's okay," Ethan said, voice firm. "I've got you, but we have to move fast." The smoke thickened behind him. Fire crackled nearby, closer than before. He scooped the girl into his arms and took the boy's hand. "Stay low. Stay behind me. Don't let go." The hallway was a tunnel of heat now. Fire crawled across the ceiling in angry orange patterns. Plaster fell in chunks. The exit seemed impossibly far, but he pushed forward. Halfway down, the boy stumbled. Ethan tightened his grip and pulled him up, but the sudden shift sent white-hot pain shooting through his injured knee. For one breath, his leg nearly gave out. One breath. One breath he didn't have. He clenched his teeth so hard he tasted blood. Not today. Not these kids. Not on his watch. He powered forward with a guttural sound, dragging his leg through the smoke as the flames roared above them. The girl sobbed into his shirt. The boy wheezed, coughing violently. Lights flickered through the smoke ahead the open front door. Snow blowing inside. People yelling from below. He pushed harder. The building groaned, a terrible shifting rumble. Something was giving way. They were seconds from collapse. "Go!" someone shouted outside. "Get out of there now!" Ethan lunged the last few feet, half falling, half diving out the door and onto the snow-covered steps as the upper landing cracked behind him. A blast of cold air hit his lungs. He gasped, coughing hard, clutching the kids to his chest as he slid down the last step and onto the ground. People rushed toward them. The girl was crying, but alive. The boy was coughing, but breathing. The crowd erupted shouts, gasps, someone sobbing with relief. The woman from earlier screamed and sprinted forward. "Those are Mary's kids. Oh my God, they're alive!" She dropped to her knees, pulling both children into her arms. Ethan tried to push himself up, but his leg buckled. He caught himself on the icy pavement, breathing smoke blinking through the haze. "Call 911. "Again," someone shouted. "Tell them kids were rescued," another voice. Holy hell, he went. "In there. Is that the guy from the Lucky Mart video? He shouldn't be walking at all." Look at his leg. Ethan stayed on his knee chest, heaving. He didn't care who was watching, didn't care what they thought. The kids were safe. That was enough. But the stares kept coming, astonished, humbled, wide-eyed. The same people who might have doubted him this morning were now looking at him like they didn't understand how a man with a limp had run into a burning building while fully able-bodied bystanders froze. The fire trucks finally screamed down the icy street sirens, bouncing off the buildings. Firefighters poured out hoses already unspooled. One ran straight to Ethan and gripped his shoulder. Cole. Ethan. Cole. Thought that was you, Ethan. Blinked. It was Donnelly, someone he'd served with before the accident. Jesus, man, Donnelly said, eyes wide. You went in there without gear. Ethan coughed a laugh. Didn't have time to shop for the right equipment. Donnelly shook his head, stunned admiration written all over his face. You saved them. Those kids wouldn't have made it. Behind him, more firefighters nodded, murmuring to each other as they darted inside to finish clearing the building. The woman who'd been barefoot earlier climbed toward him through the snow, wrapped now in blankets others had thrown over her. She knelt in front of him, her eyes shining through tears. You saved them, she whispered. You saved those babies. Ethan looked down, breath still trembling. They just needed someone to reach them. People gathered around, forming a wide half circle, neighbors, tenants, strangers who'd watched from porches. And none of them looked at him the way they used to. No doubt. No pity. No dismissiveness. Just awe. And gratitude. And something else. Recognition. The fire behind them roared as another window burst. Flames shot into the night sky. But the crowd didn't take their eyes off Ethan. The hero no one expected. The man they'd said wasn't capable anymore. The man they had doubted, dismissed, underestimated. He had limped into a burning building with nothing but instinct, courage, and a heart that refused to quit. And he'd brought 2 children out alive. As the snow kept falling, and the sirens blared and the flames crackled into the darkness, Ethan realized something long buried had come back to life. Not just the part of him that ran toward danger, the part that believed he still mattered. Snow kept falling in thick, wet sheets as firefighters swarmed the burning apartment building. The orange glow pulsed in the sky like a heartbeat, and smoke drifted across the crowd gathered on the sidewalk. Sirens echoed. Radios crackled. But in the middle of all that noise, there was a strange stillness around Ethan, like a pocket of quiet no one wanted to break. He sat on the back bumper of an engine while a paramedic checked his vitals. His face was streaked with soot, his hair damp with melted snow, and his bad knee throbbed with a deep, insistent pulse. The 2 children he'd carried out were wrapped in silver blankets nearby, clinging to each other as their neighbor and a responding officer tried to comfort them. Parents cried. Neighbors murmured prayers. People stared at him like he wasn't supposed to be real. A man who'd shouted about waiting for someone more capable earlier now hovered 10 feet away, eyes lowered, hands shoved in his pockets. He looked like he wanted to speak, but couldn't find a single word that wouldn't crumble in his throat. The paramedic finished wrapping Ethan's knee, but didn't step back. She just looked at him. You sure you don't want to go to the hospital? I'm sure, Ethan said quietly. She swallowed hard. You shouldn't be alive after what you went into. He didn't know how to answer that, so he didn't. Donnelly walked back over helmet under his arm, white steam rising from his jacket in the cold. Cole, he said in a low voice. Chief wants to talk to you. Ethan blinked. Chief Harlow Donnelly nodded. Says it's important. The crowd parted as Ethan stood slowly, carefully, and followed Donnelly toward the command vehicle. Every head turned. People whispered. Some just stared with wide, hollow eyes. He kept his gaze forward, but he could feel it all pressing in on him, the awe, the shock, the guilt from those who'd judged him only hours ago. Chief Harlow stood near the charred entryway, writing something on a clipboard while speaking into a radio. When she saw Ethan, her expression shifted from stern focus to something that softened the lines around her eyes. "Ethan Cole," she said. "I don't think there's a firefighter in this county who hasn't heard that name." He stiffened. "Not for good reasons. For the best reasons," she countered. "You saved your whole squad before the collapse. Donnelly told me everything the night it happened. What you did was heroic even before tonight." He shook his head. "Doesn't feel heroic when you're the only one who doesn't walk out. That's not how any of us saw it." He didn't know what to do with that, so he stayed quiet. The building crackled behind them, shifting under the weight of fresh snow. Harlow folded her arms, studying him. "You were first one on scene," she said. "Went up without gear, pulled out 2 children. And from what Donnelly tells me, you managed a full-floor search while half that hallway was rolling over your head." She let out a breath. "Cole, you should have died up there." "But I didn't," he said simply. "No," she replied. "You didn't. And I think I know why." He frowned. "Why?" She reached into her pocket and handed him a folded newspaper clipping, old yellowed edges frayed. Ethan froze as he recognized the photo, the warehouse collapse, the twisted beams, the stretcher being carried through snow. His own face, ghost pale, bruised. "Why do you have this?" he asked quietly. "I keep records of every major incident in the county. It helps me train new crews, helps me remind them what real courage looks like." She tapped the photo. "This one sits on my office wall because it changed half our fire codes, because it taught us what structural fatigue looks like in cold weather operations, and because the man in that picture made a call that saved 7 lives." He stared at her, stunned. "You didn't just get hurt that night," Harlow said. "You gave us years of knowledge and training. You saved people you'll never meet just by surviving." He felt the world tilt slightly under him. She stepped closer. "So, when I just watched you go up those stairs tonight, limp or no limp, it didn't surprise me. You didn't become a hero tonight. You always were one. Folks just forgot. Or maybe they never knew." The words cracked something deep inside him, something he'd buried under 2 years of quiet humiliation, limited duties, and private grief. A shout behind them broke the moment. "Ethan!" He turned. Megan was hurrying through the crowd, snow tangled in her hair, coat half-zipped, Theo gripped in one hand. She must have left work the second she heard the news. Her face was streaked with fear. When she reached him, she threw her arms around him with a force that nearly knocked them both off balance. "Oh my God, Ethan," she cried, voice shaking. "When they said someone ran into the building, I knew it had to be you. I knew it." Theo clung to his waist, burying his face in Ethan's coat. "Uncle Ethan, don't do that again," he whispered fiercely. "You scared us." Ethan closed his eyes and rested his hand on the boy's back. "I'm okay, buddy." Megan pulled back, eyes red. "I'm sorry," she said, the words trembling out of her, "for everything I said. All the times I told you to stop trying, to slow down, to stay in your lane. I was scared, Ethan. I didn't want to lose you the way Naomi's family lost her." He opened his mouth, but she kept going. "But I was wrong. You didn't do something reckless tonight. You did what you were made to do. And maybe the rest of us just haven't been strong enough to let you be who you are." A murmur rose around them as more neighbors gathered. The man from the hardware store, the one who told him he should have stayed out of the way, stepped forward, face blotchy with embarrassment. I owe you an apology," he said gruffly. "I judged you without knowing anything. And I was wrong. Real wrong. Then Brad approached. Ethan's stomach tightened. Brad stood stiffly, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, eyes flicking from Ethan to the burning building and back again. He looked smaller than the guy who mocked him at the shop. Younger. Less sure of himself, Cole Brad said. Look, man. I really screwed up. All the jokes, the comments. I didn't know. His voice cracked. I didn't know who you were. Ethan didn't respond. He didn't need to. Brad swallowed hard. I shouldn't have treated you like that. You saved kids tonight. You ran in when guys twice your size froze. And I couldn't move. I just stood there. His voice dropped. I don't know how to look you in the eye. Ethan let out a long, slow breath. Just be better going forward. Brad nodded, relief flooding his face. Chief Harlow cleared her throat behind them. Cole, she said once you're medically cleared, I'd like you to come by the station. He blinked. Why to talk? About options. Her tone was careful, controlled, but there was a glint in her eyes, a hint of something that felt like respect. We're short-handed. We're starting a new training program for recruits. And after what I saw tonight, I think you could teach them things they won't get from any manual. Ethan stared at her. You want me to train firefighters? He asked quietly. I want you to shape them, she replied. Because you understand exactly what they'll face. And you know what it costs. We need someone like you. Someone who's lived it and survived. He stood there, not trusting his own voice. Behind him, Megan squeezed his arm. Theo looked up at him with glowing pride. Donnelly gave a small nod of encouragement. The kids he'd carried out were now wrapped in blankets, safe with officers. The building smoldered, but the worst was over. The world around him had shifted. He wasn't the slow inspector anymore, not the man with a limp, not the guy co-workers whispered about, not the fallen firefighter who got pulled out on a stretcher. People saw him now. Really saw him. A firefighter walked up with a clipboard. Cole, we need your statement. After that, Chief wants you to swing by the engine bay. Why? Ethan asked. We'd like to take a picture, the firefighter said with a grin. The kids want one. And well, the department does too. For a long moment, Ethan just stood there in the falling snow, watching breath rise in white bursts, listening to the wind whistle past the half-ruined building. Something new waited on the horizon. A decision. A chance. A doorway. Whatever came next, it wasn't going to be quiet, or small, or hidden. It would be a return. Not to who he was before, but to who he was meant to be. And as the firefighters waved him over, as his nephew watched him with awe, as the community that doubted him now stepped aside with reverence, Ethan walked toward the station lights, toward the new beginning that had just opened in front of him. The next morning, Brookside woke to a sky washed clean by snowfall and a town buzzing with one story. By sunrise, photos of Ethan standing with the rescued children, soot-smudged, exhausted, leaning on his bad leg, were already spreading through neighborhood pages and group texts. People who had never spoken to him before suddenly knew his name. Folks who had doubted him were now telling anyone who would listen that they knew he had it in him. Even the auto shop felt different when he walked in later that afternoon. The room went quiet, not with judgment, but with something heavier. Brad stood from the workbench, rubbed the back of his neck, and walked over. Ethan, I told the boss I was wrong about you, he said. I told him I was out of line, and I meant it. If you stay, and I hope you do, I want things to be different. I need to be different. Ethan didn't rub anything in, didn't scold. He simply nodded. Thank you. Clark, the supervisor who'd cut his hours, approached next. He looked like a man facing his own reflection for the first time. "I misjudged you," he admitted quietly. "You've earned more respect than I gave you, and I'm going to fix that." But even with their apologies, Ethan felt something shifting deeper inside himself. Something that made the shop feel smaller, almost too small for the man who'd walked out of that burning building. That afternoon, Chief Harlow texted, asking if he could stop by the station. Not for paperwork, not for questions, for a conversation. When he arrived, the firehouse was warm, the heat from the engine still lingering in the air. The walls held photographs of crews past, and present faces lined with soot eyes fierce with purpose. The kind of purpose he used to wake up with every morning. Harlow met him by the kitchen table. "I'll cut to it," she said. "We want you here. Maybe not fighting fires, not yet, but leading, teaching, training new recruits, helping us rebuild a mentorship program we've needed for years." He swallowed hard. "You're sure?" She smiled. "I'm sure. And judging by how you walked into that fire, I think you're more ready than you think." He stared at the offer sitting between them. It wasn't about returning to who he was before the collapse. It wasn't about proving anything to the town or to Brad or even to Megan. It was about finally letting himself believe that courage didn't disappear just because life knocked you off your feet. "Okay," he said softly. "I'm in." Weeks passed, then months. Winter melted into early spring, and with it came a quiet renewal in Ethan's life. His limp remained some days better, some days worse, but something in him had straightened. Strength returned to parts of him he thought had gone numb forever. He started working part-time at the station, guiding recruits through drills, teaching them what fire looks like when it's hungry, how to keep their heads steady when everything feels like it's collapsing. He didn't glorify anything. He told the truth, and the recruits listened, really listened, like his words carried weight that textbooks never could. On weekends, he still helped at the shop, but now the air felt lighter. Brad asked real questions about techniques instead of making jokes. Clark treated him like a valued team member, not a liability, and customers recognizing him from the news thanked him while dropping off their cars. Megan checked in more often, not out of fear, but pride. She invited him to dinner again the way she used to, and listened to his stories with soft eyes. Theo bragged about him at school, called him the bravest person in Ohio, though Ethan always insisted that was an exaggeration. Spring rolled into early summer. One evening after a training session, Ethan walked the quiet streets of Brookside. Kids rode bikes between mailboxes. Lawns were dotted with sprinklers. Neighbors waved from porches. The world felt gentler than it had in years. As he crossed the street toward his apartment, he saw a familiar figure waiting near the steps, the woman from the hardware store. Not the one who'd shamed him. The woman he'd rescued on that first snowy day, the mother with the toddler in the cart. She smiled when he approached. "I've been looking for you," she said. "Not to bother you, just to say thank you again." "You thanked me already," he replied. "Maybe," she said, "but my daughter wanted to give you this." She handed him a folded drawing, crayon lines, bright and messy. It showed a stick figure man with a big heart drawn on his chest, holding the hands of two stick figure kids with smiles too large for their faces. Under it, in shaky letters, "Thank you, Mr. Ethan." He stared at it for a long moment. "It's beautiful," he finally said. "She thinks you're the strongest person she's ever seen," the woman added. "And I guess I do too." When she left, he remained standing on the steps, the drawing held gently in his hands. The sun dipped low, painting everything gold. A soft breeze brushed past his jacket. For the first time in a long time, he felt steady. Not because people were praising him, not because the town had changed their mind about him, but because he had finally changed the way he saw himself. He wasn't the man who lived in the shadow of a collapsed building anymore. He wasn't the guy who walked with a limp that others used to measure his worth. He was a man who ran into danger because his heart refused to do anything less. A man who got back up over and over until the world had no choice but to see him clearly. He stood there a while longer, staring at the sunset, the drawing still clutched in his hand. Somewhere down the block, kids laughed. Somewhere behind him, the firehouse bell rang for evening drill. Ethan breathed in deeply the scent of cut grass, warm pavement, and hope drifting in the air. Sometimes life breaks you. Sometimes the world underestimates you. And sometimes on an ordinary night in an ordinary town, everything quietly comes back together. Not because things got easier, but because you finally remembered who you are.